Hey everybody, welcome back to Political Science 101, American Government and Politics. Today we're going to talk about the judicial branch of government, and I need to begin by apologizing to you all that this video is a day late. I'm sorry about that. I'll do my best to keep that from happening again, but remember, you can watch these at your convenience. You don't have to watch these at a certain time. All that really matters is that you watch the videos. If you want to keep up in the class, you should watch the videos before the next video is posted. But what really matters is that you get them all watched before the first quiz. That quiz is going to be this coming Wednesday, February 10th. Today, we'll talk about the judicial branch of the federal government. Monday, this coming Monday, February 8th, we'll talk about levels of government, federal, state, and local, and the differences and the importance of those levels, and how different levels of government impact us, the people living in the United States. But before we get to that, we've got to wrap up the branches of the federal government. And that means we've got to talk about the courts, the court system, the judicial system of the United States, particularly the federal court system. As we'll discuss on Monday, there are state courts as well. There are local courts that are usually part of a state judicial system, but today I'm just going to talk about the federal judiciary, the federal courts. Article 3 of the Constitution talks about the power of the judiciary. It describes the things they can do to take part in the federal government, and also to provide a balance against the power of the legislative and executive branches. If you don't remember anything else about judiciary, remember this: they review and interpret the laws that are passed by the other two branches of federal government. We've talked about statutes that are the second most powerful type of law after the Constitution in the United States. But what did I just say? Statutes fall under the Constitution in that hierarchy of laws. So, statutes cannot violate the Constitution. I also talked about executive orders and administrative regulations. Those also shall not violate the Constitution. Well, who gets to determine that? Who decides that? The answer is the federal judiciary, the federal courts. So, Congress passes a bill, and it's signed into law by the president. Then what? Then it's up to the executive branch, the president's branch, to enforce that law, to make that law happen in a real-world kind of way. But what if that statute, that new law, is unconstitutional? What if somebody even thinks it might be unconstitutional? Then they can sue. There are only certain ways you can sue the government, but one of them is certainly if the federal government's laws have been passed in a way that goes against the Constitution. Later on this semester, we're going to talk about the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. The 14th Amendment says that all people must be treated equally under the law. Now, is that always what happens in reality? No. But when it does not happen, when people are treated unequally under the law, people have the ability to sue whichever government entity is treating them unequally, and seek redress, seek correction by the courts. One very important historical example of that is in a case, I told you I'm not good with years and dates, but I believe it was 1967, and it was Loving versus Virginia. That is a Supreme Court case, and like all court cases, it has the two parties. Virginia was one of the parties to this lawsuit, and a person named Loving, last name Loving, was the other party. It was actually not just Virginia, but several states, including Kentucky, that were sued because those states did not allow marriages between black people and white people. 1967 was not that long ago. It was not 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 400 years ago. My parents were both alive in 1967. I bet some of your parents were too. I'm guessing if you're watching this, probably all of our grandparents were alive in the 1960s. And it's an important decade when it comes to civil rights, of course, because there were many pieces of important federal legislation that were passed in the 1960s prior to the Supreme Court case. So other laws had been passed saying that the federal government and no government, state, local, any government in the United States could discriminate on the basis of race. But yet, these states were not allowing people to get married. Why is that discrimination? Why does that have anything to do with equal protection under the law? Well, because if a state says these people can get married and therefore avail themselves to all the legal benefits of marriage, but these people over here cannot be married, that is discrimination. And the Supreme Court agreed. That's their job, to look at laws in the United States, to compare them to the Constitution, and determine whether or not new laws violate the Constitution. It's a little more complicated than that. They can also look to see whether executive orders violate statutes. But what you need to know about the court system is that they interpret the law. They review and interpret federal laws. Also state and local laws to see if they violate more powerful federal laws. Federal law, when it comes in conflict with state law in the United States, always wins. Federal law always wins that fight. If you don't believe me, there was a whole war fought about that. The American Civil War was fought to determine whether states and their interpretation of the Constitution and of United States laws overrode federal interpretation and federal law, and in fact the states do not. The states cannot do that. So, Judicial Branch, federal courts, they review and interpret the law. What are these federal courts? Who are these people? We've talked about the president and how the president takes office by winning the Electoral College, which is a type of vote. It's a type of vote to determine a winner and a loser. And then Congress, and how members of the United States Senate, they're elected by popular vote, statewide vote, and House of Representatives, you have a district. You have districts within the state, and those members of Congress are elected by popular vote. And of course, we're going to talk later in the semester about whether or not everybody gets a fair shot to vote or not, and how much our votes really count. But suffice it to say for now that the president is elected, in a manner of speaking, and members of Congress are elected by the people. What about these federal judges? Well, there are three levels of courts. There are three levels of federal courts. There are federal district courts. They hear trials. They hear complaints. If you sue somebody in federal court, you go to federal district court. If you face a federal criminal charge, That's federal district court. If you lose that case and you don't like the outcome, you appeal to the circuit courts. If you lose there and don't like the outcome, you appeal to the United States Supreme Court, who, of course, as you might imagine, they do not entertain the vast majority of the cases that people want them to hear, that people appeal to them. But they hear some, and the ones they hear generally become historically significant, because once the United States Supreme Court determines a certain interpretation of federal law, that is the law from thenceforth. That is the law. As I mentioned, I believe I mentioned at least briefly the first week of class, there are many types of laws. And court opinions, those are the documents where a court issues their written statement, their written answer to a legal question, their written verdict or decision in a case. That is the law. I mentioned Loving versus Virginia because that's a very important Supreme Court case that determined whether or not black people can marry white people in this country. That Supreme Court case became the law. There was no need for a statute or an executive order making that so. After that court case came down, the law was that black people and white people, consenting adults, can be married anywhere in the United States. And no state and no local government has the ability to say, no, you can't. Because the federal government says, yes, you can. The federal government, in that case, in the form of the United States Supreme Court. So, that is an overview of the federal judiciary. If we have time in the semester, and or if you have more specific questions about the federal courts and the judicial branch of government, post them in the comments below. And we'll try to get to them as much as we can this class, this semester. But also, please post below that you watched this video, that you watched, you listened, and if you have any thoughts or questions, please post them. I think I'm caught up on your emails, I believe I am, but I know there's still a couple of YouTube comments that I need to respond to because you asked some very pertinent and very thoughtful questions, as I ask you to do. And that is how you get your participation grade in the class. And so I'm going to respond to those. I have not forgotten about you. I'll get some answers to those, or I'll post some answers to those questions and comments. Thank you all for watching. Everyone, please have a good rest of the week. I'll talk to you all on Monday. The quiz is next Wednesday. But first, we're going to talk about levels of government this coming Monday. Thank you all so much for watching. Please have a safe rest of the week. Have a safe and have a fun weekend. Have as much fun as you can during a dangerous global pandemic. I hope you're all safe, and I hope your families are doing well. Thank you for watching.